That wasn't meant to be a outtake or anything anyways. I just thought I'd tell you what I meant.
Right now, I always like when someone ends a big long story with, "Are we rolling?" I was like, "No."
Yeah, good. I just didn't have to cut it later.
I just need a couple seconds of room tone. I guess I start.
Yeah.
Welcome back to... I'm going to do a clean cut of that. Welcome back to All Doubts. I'm Vincent, and I'm still here with Phelan. Say hi, Phelan.
Hi, it's me again. Back from a few weeks ago. I hopped forward into the future.
Yes, it has been many moons since our previous recording, but we're back again to talk about... continuing to talk about Endgame.
I thought you were just going to say to talk about Avengers Endgame, and I was going to say ... again.
Yes.
No, it's in there now.
Yes,
you can't change
yes, and.
yes, let's.
But first, how have you been?
I've been doing pretty good. I've been tired. I've been busy. That's why it's been so many moons since the last time we did this. Been watching movies and television in my off time when I'm not at work. It's very much a slog of wake up, do chores, go to work, come home, be really tired, but try and fit in time to watch things. How are you?
I have been good. I've also been watching some movies and TV shows. Similar schedule as yours, of minus the chores. So my place is a mess.
Well, I don't just mean cleaning chores. I mean going to the bank, getting groceries, doing that.
Yeah, same. My place is a mess.
Perfect.
But what have you been watching?
I've been chugging through a lot of stuff since last time we did this. I shotgunned the rest of the first season of Titans, which was amazing. I am sitting with nails chomped waiting for season 2. They end on I know you and I talked about the end of the first season. I won't spoil it obviously, but they end on a cliffhanger. And I actually found out that they were going to have one more episode and decided to instead make that the first episode of season 2, which makes so much sense. And apparently, I heard it referred to in some outlets as divisive. I think because it ended on that, but it was really well done. The acting and writing gets so much better after the first 2 or 3 episodes. It gets a lot more current and steady and starts to pick up. Has some cool gritty action, lots of profanity from your favorite, young DC characters, but also just starts to move along at a way better pace.
Now, I haven't finished the first season. Does it end on a cliffhanger, or does it end on a thing happening?
Both.
Okay, because I remember. Sorry, go on.
No.
Because I remember there being a lot of upsets around whichever season of Walking Dead it was, where it ends with Negan with his baseball bat.
Season 7, yeah.
Right? And how saying that it should have... It ends with him picking someone to hit with his nail bat, or whatever it is.
Her name is Lucio.
And
the bat's name is Lucio.
Us seeing from the perspective of the person he chooses, but us the viewers not finding out who it is until, several months later.
Yeah.
When we find out who it is. And people were saying how there's no real... the emotional response to the, oh no, who is it? Who could it be? Kind of thing is not as strong as it could have been if it was, oh no, I can't believe he killed so-and-so.
Right.
And then stewing for months to we're gonna get him kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because it's them having the break between the seasons.
Right.
Be hinging on the mystery of who it is rather than the emotional resonance of whoever it is that getting killed. People were saying it would have been a better choice to do the other one.
Right. I think the way that the first season of Titan ends is in such a way that there's some dark demon mind control kind of stuff going on, and which is all I'll say because I hesitate to spoil anything by talking further, but it ends in such a way that probably based on the basis of how these shows, particularly superhero things go, that person will not be evil probably, and you know it's probably like the rest of the good guys are going to come save the day sort of thing, but it leaves on that note of like, in I guess you could say a bleak way, though I don't really think it's that bleak because we kind of have this knowledge, but it's the question of when. It's kind of like it's what point in the next season is this person going to, you know, rejoin, or are they going to have a more complicated story arc than that? Is it going to be instantly resolved? So for me, it was in such a way that I'm like, yeah, it sucks that I have to wait a year for this, particularly because, come on, Ian Glenn, Sir Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones being cast as Batman? Yes, please. I am waiting with bated breath. I am so excited for that.
I haven't gotten to that part yet. They ended up having someone for Batman?
No, that's the thing. He's not joining until season 2.
Okay.
So, because season 1, they keep that joke trope going of not showing Bruce Wayne's face, and it's so frustrating. But now, see, as someone who like started watching in the middle, like, of all this going on, like casting announcements for the next season, now in the back of like my headcanon, as the kids call it, I'm picturing Jorah Mormont as Batman.
Because I remember from the parts of the first season that I did see, they were being very, very creative in like not showing Batman.
Yeah.
To the point where they'd have Robin read a letter from Batman with Batman standing in the doorway behind them in shadow, just reading it to himself.
Because they were like, man, we got one shot at this, and we don't want to do a full like Iron Man, War Machine recasting the guy between movies, right? So, so that, highly recommend. Get past the first couple episodes. They start introducing more characters, more dynamics, gets more intricate, a lot more interesting. I also recently shotgunned the last season and a half of a series of Unfortunate Events.
Yes.
That is a book series that has been beloved to me for a long time. I had kind of like a hard time in the first season getting into it because I'm in the minority that loved that movie back in the day and was always disappointed that it didn't go further. I think people's problems with it is them remembering it askew because it's got a lot of similarities to like the show. But also, I've said this countless times and cannot scream it from the mountaintops high enough. Patrick Warburton as Lemony Snicket, as the narrator of the series, is an absolute treasure. Oh, whoever did that I have a thing a lot of times where it'll be like such and such, whoever did this deserves a raise. I think I said that in our last episode, actually. Whoever was like, they're spitballing ideas like Lemony Snicket, the narrator, he's going to have these dark comedy, deadpan asides to the camera, breaking the fourth wall. Who do we get? To whoever that guy in the boardroom who was like, Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove,
let's give him a chance.
Deserves a raise because he's like by far the heart and soul and such an amazing performance and part of that show. So I did enjoy the first season overall, but it was weird for me. By the time we got to the second season, it still took me a little bit of warming up because it's been a while since I'd watched. And I took a big gap. Then I finished the last half of the second season a little, like, very recently. Right. And it just fully picks up again and caught me in a way I wasn't expecting. And I consumed the third season, like, voraciously.
What was the end of the second season again?
The end of the second season...
Was the Village? Was that the end of the second season?
No, The Village... you mean, like, the Village of Val Delvatita, the one with the crows? That was the beginning of season 2. That was that was book 7. That was, or sorry, not the beginning. That was like the middle, I guess, of season 2. Was book 7. And then third season,
it's the cliff.
It ends with the slippery, or hang on, no, it ends with the carnival.
Yeah, it ends with the carnival going into...
Season 2 ends with a carnival being burned down with lions and fortune tellers. There's my hook and tease for you. And the third season begins with book 10, the slippery slope, where they're all on the mountain.
Right.
And it just keeps going full steam ahead from there. As well as the fact, also, like, you're watching it, and then all of a sudden they're introducing, a couple new characters, as, last seasons tend to do to kind of bring things home. And all of a sudden, like, Richard E. Grant is there. You watched the third season, right?
Oh, yeah, I think.
The man with the beard but no hair, one of the villains of the season, is Richard E. Grant, aka like 2-time Academy Award nominee, aka was nominated last year for like Best Actor at the Oscars. Like, I just love that they pulled out all the stops and got this random smorgasbord of people, like everything from CW actors to like multi-nominated veteran Shakespeare actors.
Yeah, Shakespeare.
It's wild. It's just amazing. And I love the way that it's shot, the way that it's lit, their like camera angles. Some of the CGI is kind of janky, but it's a beautifully shot show. Like, just amazing, breathtaking scenery. Their use of color palettes is fantastic.
I'm disappointed they didn't have Captain Wittershins, though. He was a delightful character in the books.
In the books.
Just a bewildering, delightful character.
I feel like this is a separate podcast in and of itself. How great is it?
Did you ever listen to the audiobooks?
I did not.
I recommend the audiobooks. They're read by Tim Curry.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, sweet turn.
So he's but as it's like this like creepy, he has a very like creepy voice if he leans into it.
Yeah. Professor Frankenfurter.
Yeah, and he also has a goofy voice if he leans into it. Because did you see that he was one of the like what do you call them? The like live action cutscenes in Command and Conquer, right?
Oh, yeah, I know the game you're talking about.
Yeah, and where he's like some like Russian. I think he's like the main like mission guy, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of his lines is just like, it's just like, so buck wild that he can see him in the recording, just like almost like break character, like halfway, just like laugh at how goofy his line is.
Yeah.
Where he's talking about space, it's amazing. But no, yeah, he's the audiobook narrator for Series of Unfortunate Events, and I didn't realize he had that much like vocal range because he was doing voices.
Oh yes, he's impeccable.
And I think a lot of people lean on that as one of the ones because it was like a really well done. There were like I think like 2 or 3 books where like the author decided to like, oh, I'll try my hand on it. Then he handed it back to Tim Curry when he realized like how difficult it is.
Mm-hmm.
But how like his accent, his voice, his performance of the words of the Series of Unfortunate Events really makes it sound more dark, like more like gothic.
Right. Which it is like a gothic dark comedy,
yeah.
Which is the whole gist, right?
But it's also like a children's book. Right?
Yeah.
So I think like a lot of people who like wanted the show to be more dark or wanted the movie from way back when with Jim Carrey to be more dark are thinking of the audiobook incarnation of it, which his very dark and severe British voice, making it sound more serious and intense than it perhaps was intended to be.
I think one thing that I did have is I love Neil Patrick Harris as an actor. He didn't grab me the way that Jim Carrey did back in the day. There was a bit too much kind of slapstick comedy, but he's got a couple parts, particularly in the last season, where they give him like villainous monologues, and they do like slow pans on his face with faint, sinister music in the background. You keep waiting for him because of the precedent the show is set to break into like a joke or something. Yeah. But there are these monologues they just give him in that last season where he doesn't. There's no punchline. He is like threatening people with death and basically commenting on like the duality and dichotomy of morality and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, that was like an amazing performance that I wasn't expecting because they've set it up with like a lot of comedy. Yeah. So in some ways, some of the darker moments I feel like were really fulfilling because of like the gist of the book. It's literally in the name of Series of Unfortunate Events, kind of like a bleak overtone.
And like the books themselves are one of the kind of the series is like Harry Potter, I suppose, that gets more like mature with its readers, or it gets darker as the books go on. Yeah, right. And there's a very like clear, if you were to split the series in 2, like a clear division of like where the formula changes. Yeah. Right. And that's around where with the Village of Foul Devotees, the Crow book. Yeah. Where that happens, where they like break the formula, and things start becoming more severe. More severe, more like dynamic, I guess.
Dynamic's a good word for it. Yeah, it is very much a dynamic series where things can happen at a left field.
And one thing I did like about the show is that like since it came out after the books were done, for several years,
a decade.
He already had all the pieces in place that he didn't need to like retrofit some kind of like retcon. Yeah. Because like with the eye tattoo, the emblematic eye tattoo that is present from the first book, it changes what it is, or like what it looks like changes, like once he realizes he wants a secret organization. Yeah. But now, that he knows he wants a secret organization, he didn't have it all consistent from the start. Right.
That is true. You don't have to change things as you go along. As happen, for example, joking about the Batman thing a moment ago, where they would have to, recast someone retroactively, and it kind of like, this person doesn't look like this person. It can take you kind of out of the world building sometimes. Definitely, yeah. In conclusion, very, very recommend. Watch from start to finish. If you like a kind of off-color, dark comedy, gothic. On the movie front, my 2 main viewings, I've even lost track of the movies I've seen, aside from Avengers Endgame again, which we're getting to. I did see Rocketman very recently. Absolutely loved it. Very much loved that it embraced the style of not really being a biopic per se, but more of a musical biopic. Okay. So they take liberties, and honestly, some of the nitpicks that people and critics have had, they even admit themselves are just that. They're kind of inconsequential because the narrative is structured in such a way that does it matter that that the character of Elton John is portrayed sings a song that he hadn't written yet? Not really, because it's an impactful scene visually and musically speaking. For me, like, straight 9 out of 10. Performances were amazing. Taron Egerton, I'm looking forward to everything he does in the future. He keeps on cranking out bangers in movies. Very much loved what he encapsulated.
How does it compare to Bohemian Rhapsody?
That's been a lot of buzz. Personally, Queen has a special place in my heart. And Bohemian Rhapsody, despite some of, like, there was conflict and controversy surrounding that movie in a lot of different fronts, which is, like, also, I keep joking about such and such as a podcast into itself. Bohemian Rhapsody is like a podcast into itself. But I very much enjoyed Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm really glad to see Rocketman being as critically well received as it is. Rocketman is definitely a bit grittier. Personally, I disagreed with some Bohemian Rhapsody critics in that I didn't think that the story of Freddie Mercury needed to be sensationalized or made darker or more graphic, per se. It's a little bit edgier on Rocketman. Obviously, there's like the much talked about like gay sex scene, which really isn't people, like, it is in no way gratuitous. It is in no way excessive. It's actually, like, pretty tame, all things considered, but it shows, like, this genuine, like, outpour of affection between two men that I think Hollywood hasn't taken a chance on doing something like that. So I know, like, I'm not in the best position to claim what is or isn't, like a trend-setting, cinematic moment for, particularly, during Pride Month. I'm not in a position to accurately attest to that, so I won't try to, but I will say for me it was very impactful and unlike something that I feel like I've seen in cinema before. Okay. Just as, like, it was this scene of affection and caring between the two men. I really liked how it was portrayed. I thought it was really like a story about love, and it's got, like, it's campy bits and it's kind of hammy bits, but you know what? Like, it's still a genuinely impactful movie, and Taron Egerton sells the hell out of it, as well as Jamie Bell, who I think is an underrated actor who plays Elton John's songwriting partner, Bernie Taupin. He absolutely impeccable performance. Just, like, straight 10s it all around, honestly. Some really good work for some really great actors. Like Bryce Dallas Howard is Elton John's mother. Richard Madden as John Reed, who was Elton John's, like, one-time manager and lover. He's tremendous as well. Yeah, very charming and debonair, but with, like, a very, like, sneaky. He does not have any. He does not have any Game of Thrones tie-ins, unfortunately. I wish, I'd be a lot more interested in Elton John's kind of sinister manager and his blazer sitting there petting a wolf like a Bond villain, but alas, it does not happen. And finally, but definitely not least, last but not least, anyways, however that phrase goes, I finally am on par with you and saw Detective Pikachu. Absolutely loved it. Another, like, straight, like, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was so much good fun. I see a lot of things you were talking about. Like, a bunch of things were predictable, but the way that they got there was a lot of fun. Yeah. And as an update to last time, I did see it with that 5-year-old that I mentioned I was going to.
Your cousin, you said?
Girlfriend's cousin.
Okay.
I sometimes just refer to her interchangeably as my cousin, too.
Okay. I just don't want to say if he's like, I watched it with a random 5-year-old.
I watched it. Oh, okay. Ooh, sinister. Don't like that very much. I watched it with, let's for the sake of expediency, call it my cousin. Okay. And I've gotten that kid hooked on Pokemon. And she's very scared of Mewtwo.
Prior to the movie, or
this is like a couple years in the making. She's a fellow Pokemon devotee. She's if I play Pokemon Go or bring over any of the Pokemon games, she's like my assistant. She'll tell me how we should play and what attacks we should use and which Pokemon we should catch. She doesn't like Mewtwo. She finds Mewtwo very terrifying, but she made it
weird character design.
He's kind of atypical and alien looking, hey? But
by design, it needs to be.
But definitely looking forward to any sequels they do. I know this is another one of, by this point you've probably seen this. If not, here's a moment where you can plug your ears, go get up and make something.
Spoilers for Detective
Pikachu in case you care. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay, we're back. I wasn't expecting Ryan Reynolds to be the dad at the end. I figured from the way the trailers did it that they were obviously going to have some big actor be the character's father, but I actually wasn't expecting Ryan Reynolds to be the dad.
So, like, during the movie, when they kept not showing the dad's face, I'm like, why aren't they showing the dad's face? It's probably someone we're going to recognize. Oh my god, it's going to be Ryan Reynolds.
It was so simple and so effective, because when he's standing there at the end, it was like, Detective Pikachu just 1-2 punched me, and I wasn't expecting it.
And now I guess it makes sense why they didn't want to cast Danny DeVito as the dad. as the dad. Can you just imagine that?
That'd be impeccable.
Like, hey, give your dad a hug.
Hey, kid. Like, reprising his Hercules role. Come here, kid. But, sorry, now I'm just thinking of Danny DeVito and Hercules.
I also don't know how they're going to do a sequel. I imagine they're going to do a sequel. Of course they're going to do a sequel. But, like, I don't know how they're going to do a sequel, because, like, the way they had it end, or the way they explained how the magic of this particular event happened isn't something they can, like, repeat. You know?
Maybe it's just like
They
detective.
sort of tied it off.
It'll be like Detective and Pikachu in the second one. It'll be back to his dad, who is the detective who has a Pikachu.
Is his dad just gonna, like, pretend to be Philip? Like, just throw his voice. Like, no, hey, son, Pikachu's on again.
I don't really need to know what Ryan Reynolds' character in this universe does in his spare time. If it involves dressing up in a Pikachu costume, as long as it's nothing too sinister, I'm fine. But I'd rather it didn't go that direction.
Well, like, the only, like, carryover we saw was, like, being a detective and drinking a crap ton of coffee.
Yeah. As talking Pikachu, Detective Pikachu himself says, I can stop anytime I want to. These are just choices. And on that note...
but yeah, I've also been watching a lot. I'm one episode away from finishing Doom Patrol.
Yes.
It is great.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the finale. The pre-finale was also great. Got to see a lot more of Alan Tudyk, who's the bad guy.
And a very prolific actor.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of, like, little things, like, recently. Like, he was the voice of the parrot in the new Aladdin. Really? Yeah.
He was also the voice of the chicken in Moana a couple years ago.
And he's been doing a lot of, like, little, like voice effect works.
Prolific is very much a word to describe him. And it's funny because it ties back to also, we were talking last time about, voice acting and how it's its own field. Like,
he was in both Wreck-It Ralph's.
Mm-hmm, he was.
I like that he's being in more things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really fun. I've started watching Deadwood.
Oh, that's been on my list for a long time. Ian McShane's a great actor.
Yeah, no, just entirely because Ian McShane. He's been in, like, a bunch of stuff, like, lately.
Quick sideways, I'm sorry to steal the spotlight for a second. I also saw John Wick since last time we talked.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Ian McShane.
Yeah, he's been in the John Wicks. He was in the new Hellboy. He's been in, like, a couple other things, like, in the past little while. And then, I'd always been wanting to pick up Deadwood.
Wrong franchise.
Imagine the crossover.
Ryan Reynolds in the Old West, yeah.
But yeah, it's entirely for his character. And it's like, I'm only a couple episodes in. I'm recognizing some people who, like, are in other things since then.
HBO's good for that.
Like, one guy who I guess might be one of the least recognizable of the other recognizable people is the guy who went on to be the one of the evil Terminators in Sarah Connor Chronicles, the Terminator show that is one of the many Terminator things that's being erased by future sequels.
Yeah.
I like how they just keep, like, we're making a thing, we don't like this movie, we'll just skip over that.
Well, you know what, the trailer dropped recently for Dark Fate, the new one, and they've confirmed the director.
Yeah, they're skipping the third one.
Yeah, they've said
skipping the TV series.
It doesn't
skipping the fourth one.
I think they're basically pulling, like, a whole what's become popular in Endgame is how popularized of, like, multiverse talk, of just being, like slap a multiverse stamp on it.
Like, how many third Terminator movies are there? Like, you can have, like, a whole, like, choose your own adventure of, like, which one you want to follow. Or, like, did you ever watch Clue?
With Tim Curry, with the great Tim Curry.
Yeah, you could just have here's all three Terminator movies. Just have a random movie be the third one. Like a random of the 5 third. Maybe it's Terminator 3. Maybe it's Terminator Genesis. Maybe it's Terminator Salvation. Maybe it's a TV show. Maybe it's a new one.
Time travel's anything possible.
Where was I? But yeah, I was watching Deadpool, Deadwood. I watched some movies too. I watched Brightburn.
You did. I saw it on the list.
It's, I would recommend it much higher if there weren't for the 2, like, very gross out scenes.
Okay.
One of them is in one of the trailers.
Okay.
Involving the eyeball.
Oh, okay.
And the other one involves a jaw. Both of those, like...
Excessive to you.
Yeah. Well, like, more so the eye than the jaw. The jaw is also, like, maybe some other people would have them equal, but I don't know. For me, like, finger stuff and eyeball stuff really gets to me.
Yeah.
Like, if... like, not to get too graphic, but if someone, like, dives headfirst into a wood chipper, I'll be fine. In a movie. I'd be fine.
In a movie, kids. We're making sure it's clear. In a movie.
Like, gets their hands in a wood chipper and then comes out, I'm like, nope. That's too much for me. Because, like, the hands, I don't know. I think this is, like, some other people have this as well. We
all have our triggers.
Yeah. But yeah, it aside from those, though, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It has 2 actors from The Office, so it really shows that Pam really dodged a bullet there. But no, it really it really plays out the premise of if Superman was evil.
Right.
You know, if we didn't luck out and he was like just a good person.
Thanks, Soups.
Where he's like, or where he does like obey the instructions that he sometimes gets to like take over the planet. And like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. It was really fun. Aside from, you know, the two scenes that I mentioned. I also watched Godzilla the other day, the new one. It's not bad. There's more fights. Not much, you know, it didn't like change my, like, it didn't open my eyes to new ways of storytelling, but it was fun.
It's proper fun. That's what people are going for, right?
Yeah, it succeeded in what it was trying to be,
right.
Which is what I guess I'm going to say. I also watched Booksmart, which is very, very good.
Yeah, I keep hearing about that. It's made its way onto my radar only recently.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. There was a lady in the row behind me who like really, really enjoyed it.
She was laughing away.
Yeah. I'm not much of a loud laugher, but I also enjoyed it. It's, you know, Olivia Wilde's first like feature-length directorial debut.
Right.
I think she's like directed some other things as well, but this is her first like feature-length theatrical thing. It's one of the female leads is apparently Jonah Hill's sister.
Oh.
Which I did not...
Which is funny because people are comparing it to like a female-led version of Superbad, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Jonah Hill's sister. But both the leads were very strong. You know, all the performances were very, very strong, I would say. It's very funny. It's very well written, I would say. Very, like... It follows some tropes, but not all tropes are bad. Mm-hmm. You know, they're tropes for a reason and they work. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. There's like Lisa Kudrow plays one of the characters' moms, and she is just delightful.
Cool. As
the like super supportive, but also like not really, you know, very like explicitly peripheral to the events of the movie mom.
Right.
But yeah, no, really, really fun movie. I really recommend it. I hear it's not doing as well as it should. Okay. So I really recommend checking it out if you can. That's what I've been watching. I rewatched Endgame.
Yeah, I myself did. So I'm at 3 viewings now. What about you?
Okay, I'm about like 2, 2.5. Because like when I'm doing, at work when I'm walking through the theaters, you know, I catch bits and pieces.
Right.
So let's say like a equivalent of like 2 or 3. The second time I watched it, I like missed the first part. I walked in when I was only able to get there after right after Black Widow makes the sandwich and talks to
Captain America, and then Ant-Man shows up immediately.
Yeah. So I skipped the preamble, I guess, of that.
And just got right to the nitty gritty as soon as we talk about time travel stuff. That's actually segueing now into our main topic on the topic of loud laughers. I find I'm someone who audience participation or experience very much affects me. Mm. I'm fine being in the theater by myself, but if I'm going to be in a theater with multiple other people for, you know, one of those big name, big event movies, then to me, the dynamic, the electricity in the air, the interplay of the shared experience I'm having with a bunch of people is like something that's significant to me. It was kind of a bunch of deadbeats, honestly, on my third viewing of Endgame. It was kind of disappointing, aside from like my mom and I go to a lot of movies together. We're still very close. And we saw it together the first time that I watched it, and I was just saying, "Hey, I'm kind of feeling seeing Endgame again. Will you come with me?" So we were like really quiet chatter. We're not those obnoxious people who ruin the movie. You know, we're chatting a bit as we watch whatever. A lot of the theater was dead. A lot of people uninterested. It almost seemed like there were some people just that were going to see this to try and let Endgame beat Avatar at the box office because they just seemed like so not invested in it. But there was this one woman, like on the topic of loud laughers, like 2 seats away from me. I don't know if it was her first time seeing it. It seemed like it was because there was this kinetic energy about her. She came alive. Every punchline, every Thor joke, every Rocket one-liner, she was living for it. It was raucous laughter. She was like, when everyone shows up at the end and the now, you know, famous portal scene started, she came to life. She was cheering and laughing and cackling. It was pretty cool, actually. It was fun. It added energy to the theater.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. Like, that's why whenever there's like a movie that I care about, or I feel like a lot of people are going to care about, I always try to watch it like opening night, and get a good seat, so like around like people who care about this thing.
And that's the thing with a lot of franchises, in particular, Star Wars, Marvel,
and like I was like going back to John Wick for a second. I watched the third John Wick, John Wick 3. John Wick chapter 3, Parabellum.
Yes.
And I was in the second row, and I remember like the entire theater was just like very into the movie.
Yeah.
I think it also helps because there are a lot more jokes in it than I was expecting.
There were, yeah, it was
a lot more goofs than like any of the other previous John Wicks.
While still watching a man being force-fed a hardcover book and having his jaw broken.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot it was like weirdly goofy, and like the fight in the I don't know, knife museum or whatever the fuck that was.
Yeah, there was a lot of
I don't know if they were like just not expecting it, so that made it, more, if you're not expecting the joke and a joke happens, it's funny.
It's funny.
There's sorry about it.
There definitely, yeah.
But yeah, no, every joke was like super landing. Every even things that I was like, oh, I wouldn't have gotten was a joke, but like someone else did. So then they sped up because I think there have been studies that found that laugh tracks, in sitcoms or whatever, make scenes funnier, right? So one person realizing that joke that was supposed to be maybe more subtle or whatever,
it carries. It carries.
And made it oh yeah, I get it. That was a thing. That was this isn't a spoiler, but there's a part towards the end where someone sits really close to John Wick on a couch.
Yes.
That killed in the theater. And if it was just me, I was like, oh, that's weird.
That's funny. Yeah,
that's fun. It's a fun thing, but it killed in the theater. It was wild because everyone was really into it.
Yeah,
and I love that.
Yeah, and it did carry really well. And I think that's something. There's different kinds of audience participation moments in things like horror movies or even some of the some of the more gruesome fight scenes in John Wick. The audience reaction is kind of this. It sounds like a collective. TV show filmed in front of a live studio audience where everyone goes, ooh, and there's that generic stuff. There are moments like that, in horror or in violent action movies where the audience in unison is shocked by something. And then there are the moments where everyone laughs or some people laugh. Obviously, some jokes don't land as well, and there's that uncomfortable moment where there's a quote-unquote funny line, but no one in the theater cares for it. And then there's the great moments that I've talked a little bit about audience participation in regards to Endgame last time. But definitely the first time that I saw it, when there were certain moments and I couldn't hold back anymore. There was a couple moments I almost wish I had cheered more because this movie was seeing it the first time. There will never be experience like that again. But when we finally when you get to the last act, of course, and the final fight starts with Thanos and the big three Avengers, we'll call them for time. That's when, the energy comes alive and you're ready to go. And this audience, the first time I watched it, that it had been dead so far. For me, it was when you see that shot of Mjolnir after it hit Thanos and it's hovering in the air and it goes flying back and most of the people in the theater knew what was going to happen. But regardless, the shot of Chris Evans standing there with the hammer in his hand, I screamed. I was so jubilantly, exhilarated by it. And I just yelled out. And there was silence for a second, and then other people joined me, and we all started clapping, as a theater. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty sure I started a movement that night. Because, no one else in the role was excited about Chris Evans finally having payoff that was set up, 5 years ago in the movies. But it was that, and then from that moment on, it was everything. It was the rest of that scene where he's fighting Thanos. People were more into it, living for it, as the kids say. I've been throwing that phrase a lot around recently. And, that transcends, to obviously... Then the most obvious one after that would be when the portals start opening,
right?
And you see all these, and that's why there's a certain payoff that will never appeal or apply to the future generations that watch these movies because they can consume them instantly as soon as Endgame, is released on DVD, Blu-ray, home video, all that jazz. But for all those of us who watched Infinity War a year prior and waited a year to see these characters, inevitably come back. It's a comic book story. Marvel tried to lie to us, but we all knew most of these characters were coming back. So to finally see that pay off a year later, after the unexpected, in a lot of ways, ending of Infinity War, it was this big payoff. And so it was another one of I was clapping in the theater. Other people all around the theater started clapping before you knew it, caught like wildfire. Everyone in the theater, most of them, I'm going to say, 85+%, it was clapping and hollering, whatever, because of this big unifying, exhilarating experience that finally paid off for us.
Yeah, the final charge
The Avengers Assemble. That was also where people cheered too.
I wish he didn't whisper it, because that's sort of like, I don't know if everyone heard that.
I did think about that too. Yeah, because that was something. Okay, when you rewatch a movie and you catch things you haven't caught before, I realized he does yell Avengers, but he catches the hammer and it's all the build up, and then like it's quiet, and then it's like borderline ASMR, like assemble. And then you're like, did everyone hear that? Like, there's like 1,000 people.
I imagine they're more responding to Thor just battle crying. But in
my head canon.
But that scene still gives me chills every time I see it. I catch it.
The score, that's what you want to talk about. Great all-time film scores, like Alan Silvestri with all the Avengers themes, like including that piece that he scored there when they're all coming through the portal, just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he was able to make that the Avengers tone, like the chord progression or whatever you call it. I'm not a music guy. Be rather iconic, because I remember there was a video on YouTube a couple of years ago. It was before Infinity War came out, a couple of years ago, where it was someone going around to people on the street, asking them if they could hum, the Harry Potter song, the do thing, right? Or the the Batman song from the '60s Batman, or the Spider-Man, all these icon, or the Darth Vader Imperial March. These other iconic.
Yeah, I was humming that when I was 4 years old.
Songs. And then can you sing one of the something from Iron Man or something from Avengers? And no one, they couldn't they couldn't, because it hadn't or the Indiana Jones song. Everyone knows the Indiana Jones flourish.
Yeah.
Or not the flourish, but you know what I mean. The Indiana Jones part. Yeah, the Indiana Jones part of the Indiana Jones song. But these people couldn't. The people being interviewed couldn't remember the Avengers theme, or some the other superhero songs from that thing. Mm-hmm. And the video, the thesis of the video, the argument of the video was basically how movies these days don't have iconic themes, or don't have iconic music as much as. That could be encapsulated as much as the Darth Vader march or the Indiana Jones thing or whatever. But now with the, I guess it took them 22 movies, I suppose. But I feel like that's not true anymore. That there is one for Avengers, because the Avengers set of notes, I don't know what they're called again, has been so present in all the Avenger movies, in triumphant, iconic moments of the franchise.
Right. I can't attest to public consciousness, because scores have always been important to me. I knew, saying Star Wars, for example, I've had that memorized since I was a 4-year-old kid. John Williams' work, so much of it, Star Wars, Superman, Indiana Jones, etc. It stays with you, right? So to me, it always kind of latched on, even the Avengers theme, because I associated with that iconic scene from the first one where it's all of them in New York City, and the camera's rolling around all six of them.
Right, like a circle shot?
Yeah, the Avengers together, and that's playing. So that's been in my mind for a while. But what Alan Silvestri did in Endgame was it's almost like he did, it's almost like in a musical or something, where they'll do a reprise of a song later, where they'll do it kind of, in a different octave, or slightly different pitch, or slightly slower, slightly faster.
Yeah, or different leitmotifs of the different characters.
Right, exactly. But it's the same, basically, notes, or the same theme played at a different pace or attitude. What he did with that, I believe the piece is just called Portals, because it's for the scene where all of them come together. It's like he extended the theme. Is he took and added new measurements measures. Thank you, measurements. He took he added new measures to it. He added he added more bars. He added more musical flourishes and musicality to it, and took this theme that has been around for the last 70 years as the first Avengers, and extended it and added more music to it. And before cycling back to the original Avengers theme, as they all Cap leads that charge and whatnot. So I feel like he did something that was so big there, because that scene, it still would have been, I think, amazing. Even if it was, quiet, it still would have had a certain weight to it. But that music is what elevates it to this big, level of watching all, and I think almost prevents this moment from being gratuitous, as all these, you know, thousands of people are coming through these portals to make their last stand, you know what I mean? It would almost seem like, okay, I get it, how many different ways can we bring in good guys to help fight the bad guys? But you're so encapsulated, captured by this moment, because the music is playing and it lends to like the majesty of what's going on and how big a deal this really is. How important what's happening really is.
Yeah, and like the YouTube video, I think it's sort of unfair because like the examples they use were things that are like 20, 30, 40 years old, like Star Wars.
They've been part of the pop culture, public consciousness.
Yeah, they've had time. They've had time to sink in. You know, whereas again, I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was still like it might have been in like phase 2 of Marvel. You know, so still like relatively early days of. Now we're towards the end of phase 3, right? Of this like 11-year so far franchise. So there's that. I think it's, you know, it's also sort of like unfair that to like, oh, why hasn't these movies that have been around for, I don't know, let's say 5 years, why haven't they reached the same memorability-ness of
you just added all the stuff
Star Wars, which came out in 77, or the like classic Spider-Man theme song, or Indiana Jones, or these other like classic songs.
And they also did such a good job of interspersing some of the themes that they have invented over the last decade throughout the rest of the film as well. Like one thing that I noticed it actually, I think even the first time I watched it, and I was prepared for it this recent time that I watched it, is when Tony hands Cap his shield back, when they finally agreed to make like let bygones be bygones, and they're like, we're friends again, hooray! It took several years.
This is the scene when he drives up in his car.
He drives up in his car and he hands Steve Rogers his shield back. His new Captain America, his new like forged Captain America shield, whatever. They played the like Cap's theme from the first Captain America movie. You hear it faintly in the background. It's very bugle and like trumpet based. It's something you would hear in like the 40s or the 50s for like old military recruiting videos. Right. It's like like it's
like big band
kind of thing. They're playing this theme that represents this character as he stands there with his nice tucked in shirt as if he was, you know, someone's dad in the 50s, holding the shield that is this emblem, that is this big, you know what I mean, this grand symbol to people,
iconic,
of hope and leadership and the American dream, God bless, all this stuff. So I feel like the way that they use music in the movie is very much part of the characters. It ties in so like fundamentally. It's such a, I mean, that can be said for so many movies, right? But it definitely, they play with all these different scores, which is something I also think that Infinity War did really well. Like one of my favorite, I was talking with someone recently about favorite Marvel scenes, and Endgame very much has added some new ones to the roster. I think that whole last act, there's some of the best Marvel scenes there have been, like Cap with the hammer, them leading the charge, whatnot. But one of my favorite ones was kind of like, as far as more unexpected go, there's the scene in Infinity War where you first see Captain America. And it's when basically Vision and Scarlet Witch are cornered, and it's like, oh no, what are they going to do? We're in the train station, like, Vision's gravely injured. It looks like we're not making it out of this, but we're going to stay together. And there's just the shot of the train going by, and you see Chris Evans standing there in silhouette. And there's a score that kicks in that they've used over in several of the Avengers movies now. And there's this just kind of like orchestral, you know, piece that starts playing, and you just see Captain America step out of the shadows, looking pissed off as hell, and he's got his daddy beard that all the ladies on the internet, and men, I should say, are freaked out about, and he looks so hot with his beard. But I'm digressing about Chris Evans. But he's standing there looking so severe and serious, and he's pissed off, and suddenly everyone knows it's going to be okay because Cap is here. Because that's like, so that's another one of, you know, everything that's seen, the lighting, the facial cues, and expression-based acting of Chris Evans, but also the music, heightening it and adding this severity of like, everything is fine now. Chris Evans, Roger, Steve, Shield Boy is here. It's all fine now. Do you know what I mean? And music really heightens that. And I feel like that is one of the many things that Endgame does really, really well.
Yes.
I didn't take much of a breath there.
But yeah, going back to Infinity War for a second. I remember when, like, you know, I was already working at the movie theater when Infinity War came out, and I was standing podium, you know, where you tear the tickets, and there's a theater, you know, like that gets out like right beside there, and that's always where we would put Infinity War when we had it. And I remember the first week where we had it, and people were still like coming in, they didn't know what to expect, you know, because, you know, how can you expect the ending of Infinity War unless you've read the comics, I guess. But most people haven't.
Yeah.
And most people are expecting a Hollywood, happy ending, especially in the superhero genre.
Let's lock them up and then have a credit scene that sets up the next one.
Yeah. So I remember there was this one guy who coming in. It was one of the first couple of days. I don't know if it was opening day, but no, it wasn't opening day. I wouldn't have been working on opening day. It was the first couple of days, let's say opening weekend, and this guy who was super jazzed, he was talking to on his phone to his buddy about yo bro, I'm gonna watch Infinity War, it's gonna be great. He's super pumped for it. And I remember fast forward to the end of the movie, and of course
2.5 hours later.
Yeah, and he's the first person out. His face is just stunned. It looked like he just got broken up with. He kept shaking his hands, he kept wiping his face, It was, and everybody was like that. The first, especially the people who watched it opening weekend and didn't know, hadn't been forewarned by the, hive mind public consciousness of what the ending was like.
Right.
They were just super shocked, especially, with how, certain characters who, I'm not being, Spider-Man when he is was one of the more emotive moments of Infinity War, right? That one really hit a lot of people, and you could see that because that's seconds away from the end, right? Ignoring the credits and the post-credits thing. But, I was just seeing all these people for several days. This is not just this is not an isolated incident. It was several days for several people, for several shows in this movie. Of just being so, emotionally affected by this movie was amazing to see. It was a, and a lot of people say they're into this or into that, or they're really excited about this thing, or they're really invested in this other thing. But seeing this unintentional, emotional, outwardly visible, emotional reaction that they had to this was, it's not something you see very often, especially because I don't imagine a lot of these people were expecting that, if you're going into a movie that is a tragedy, I imagine Titanic, I imagine
it's only going one way.
Yeah, there's not going to be a twist ending, it's not going to be the ship is going to rise back up from the ocean. It's not going to end with the old lady throwing the necklace into the sea and then Leo DiCaprio catching it. It's hey, I'm back. That's not going to happen.
I grew gills.
Yeah. So it's going to be a sad movie, or you can predict fairly that it's going to be a sad movie, right? Or some romantic movies, that have a star-crossed lover premise from the outset, they might end happily, but you're relatively prepared in case it does go south.
In case it,
and even then, sometimes it's still depending on the movie. There have been some movies where even if it's going to end poorly, it still hits you. But for a movie that you are totally not expecting, again, unless you've read the comics.
Even that, though, is because what's great about the Marvel movies is they pull from elements of the comics and kind of do their own things with it. So you still weren't necessarily, expecting exactly.
Plus, there's something more impactful about seeing it in live action rather than in comic book panels.
Right.
Jumping back into Endgame. Where are we in Endgame?
I mean, last time we got quite sidetracked talking about the bourgeois sensibilities of Odin and how he kind of screwed everyone over, and that was good fun. So I think jumping to talking more about the time travel sequence, which is something that I found really interesting. It's very clear. One problem that gets inspired sometimes by big things like, comic book movies, sci-fi things, as they catch on with the public consciousness, is you get those people who are, I'm not saying you have to be a die-hard comic book fan, but there's people who are kind of half paying attention during the movie, and they're going to this big cultural experience, which, no one can deny at this point the Marvel movies are. It's unprecedented how they've made this interconnected universe.
11-year franchise, 22 movies.
Exactly. And with that being said...
it's not going to be repeated anytime soon. DC is trying their best, and I think they're about to stop trying their best.
They're having a bit of a time right now, although I am curious about Robert Pattinson as Batman, but I feel like that's also another conversation.
Well, Batman's always been an outlier.
Yeah, that's true too. They've made some absolute cracker movies of his. But I feel like on the topic of people paying attention, I just can't. I said something last time that I've actually said in conversation a few times since the last time we talked about how people overuse the term plot hole. They like use it as a buzz phrase, right? And it's lost its meaning to me because I feel like people abuse it. And I feel like people, when they say plot holes and stuff like that, not that I'm saying, there aren't a couple little gaps in the foundation here, but people keep referencing the whole time travel phenomenon as it's introduced in Endgame as like a plot hole and saying that there's problems with it. And my thing is that you have to realize that if you're a consumer of fiction, whether it's classic, novels from the early 1900s or mid 1900s, or whether you're a very big just sci-fi fan in general, depending on what type of media you're consuming and the narrative of that piece, time travel has always had kind of different rules. There's people who have suppositions about if it is possible and when it could be possible and what the rules would be. And then you've got, universally accepted tropes like Back to the Future, which is something they poke fun at a lot in Endgame.
Yeah, but I agree that Back to the Future has the dumbest time travel rules in terms of like logic.
Right. The idea of you can just go back and fix everything, but it's like all these different...
But also oh no, my parents haven't kissed yet, my hand is disappearing.
So I think that with that, people say plot holes a lot about time travel, but the thing that they might not be understanding is that there have been some big instances of movies having either nonlinear narratives or time travel based narratives, and they all kind of do their own thing with it, right? I mean, Back to the Future has that kind of like, I have to get my parents together so I don't disappear like a Star Wars ghost. And then you've got things like the third Harry Potter movie, considered by a lot of people to be the best, if not, otherwise one of the best in the entries in the franchise. And they deal with time travel in their own way, where it's almost like there's this implication that things have already happened and been fixed by time travel.
Broadly speaking, there's the two kinds of time travel rules, or like laws. I guess not so much rules, but like the effects and unbreakability of time travel. There's either the you can't change the past, it always happened the way it happened, which is the Harry Potter one. There's also some other ones that escape my mind where like going back in time to try and change something is how it always happened. I believe Lost also sort of had this. I guess spoilers for Lost.
I don't think you need to give that one. I don't think we need a spoiler warning on that.
But yeah, how there's that's one category of like how it whatever happened. I think is an episode of Lost. Actually, is the title of an episode of Lost.
Wow.
They do time travel at some point in the show.
I actually didn't know that. And then
there's the other one where like you can change
time isn't immutable, which I think a great example of that staying in the genre as well as X-Men Days of Future Past, which very much you see the consequences of that movie. It wasn't only a sneaky deaky way for them to do a soft reboot of the franchise and fix many of the glaring plot holes that had been created by different continuities. And this is coming from someone who adores the X-Men movies, by the way. It also makes me sad because they didn't really get to live up to their full potential now that, they're redoing X-Men and figuring out what they're doing with that. But Days of Future Past was very impactful because I always say about that movie is that it shouldn't have worked as well as it did. You had two different casts set in two different time periods, some of them playing the same characters that you brought together and somehow it worked out. And that was amazing. But it also served to be an interesting time travel story. And I thought the properties of how they did it were cool because there were actual consequences, aside from, Hugh Jackman looking cool as hell with his graying hair and whatnot. There were characters that had been unceremoniously killed off previously that a lot of people had complained about. And smarter people retroactively went, we have a time travel story. Let's bring these people back from the dead. Right? So in that way, there are these kind of two instances. Like exactly, that's what I was kind of getting at. So you saw where I was going with like time is immutable, time is not immutable, time can be changed, time can't be changed. Depending on what the narrative is, right? Each narrative kind of has its own rules. And as long as they take the time to explain those rules, I don't think that it's a plot hole or, it can just easily be brushed off like that. Now, there's two very important scenes to that dynamic tying into the middle act of Avengers Endgame, which, believe it or not, is what we're talking about now that we've gotten here. But there's the scene, obviously, where, they're making jokes about, in one of the darker moments, actually, of the movie, as funny as it is, Don Cheadle as War Machine is talking about, why don't we just go back and strangle baby Thanos?
Yeah, is that? Yeah. Killed.
In the theater. When he just, wraps his hands, and it's messed up, but it is one of those things, too. It's like, I'm sorry,
but... And the fact that he went for the whole, garrote, and just like Homer Simpson strangling. You know, like,
We're getting a little bit dark on this
just
episode.
very involved.
Maybe we should call this like the After Hours edition. We're talking about alien warlord baby murder, but put that on a t-shirt, right? But they explain the properties of that scene of it's not like, and of course Grace leads to the great one-liner from Paul Rudd of like, Back to the Future is just a bunch of bullshit, which also killed every time in the theater that I watched it. But it's this idea of Hulk, with his wearing his glasses, so he's smart Hulk, explaining to them that, once something has happened, it's part of your past. You can't go and change that now. And that ties in again later when, and actually one of my, this movie was great with cameos, but one of my favorite parts of it was that they brought back Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One.
Yeah, that was a cameo no one was expecting.
No one was expecting. Well, it's funny because true to form, Mark Ruffalo had actually accidentally spoiled a year ago. He made some comment about oh yeah, when we were doing reshoots and we were filming and everyone was there, worked with Tilda Swinton, and everyone was like, sorry, what was that last part again? And he's like, nothing, and then of course, then Tilda Swinton shows up as this great, centuries old.
You are booked till 6:30, right?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the best cameos I thought was Tilda Swinton reprising her role as the Ancient One from Doctor Strange, as this centuries old wizard, whatever. Her dynamic and her scene with Mark Ruffalo I thought was amazing. I really enjoyed the two of them playing off each other, and it was somewhat. That's what I'm saying. If you forgot that there was Mark Ruffalo stumbling up and letting that leak out, it was a good surprise. And there's a scene also where she's explaining the properties of time travel even thoroughly than he had previously, where she's kind of filling in the gaps of what he said earlier. That basically, in this universe, you're creating a second timeline.
Yeah.
You're creating multiple time. You're creating a multiverse, right? Yeah. By time traveling, you go to live in an alternate reality, which is part of what was controversial about the end of Captain America's storyline, is everyone's like, oh, so he just ruined the past. It's like, no, he's living with alternate universe Agent Carter and having children with her in the future.
Yeah, and the Tilda Swinton scene was a good way to talk to the Hulk without worrying about the Hulk.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's all the time we have in this room today. Looks like we have a part 3.
Part 3 is happening.
See you then. I've been Vincent.
I have been Phelan.
Thanks for listening. See you next time. And we're back. I'm Vincent, and
I'm Phelan.
And we're back. I'm sorry, we're gonna...
Oh, I was just gonna say, as the prophet Eminem said, guess who's back? Back again.
Yes, we're back for a third time. We're back for a third time to continue talking about Avengers Endgame. I'm gonna put money on this is gonna be the last time.
I'm thinking so.
Of it being the main topic. I'm sure we'll talk about it in passing in the future, but let's try to...
I think one of the overall points is that that movie's had such an impact that I think for years to come, you know what I mean? I don't know that if it's had, as many iconic, pop culture affectations as some other big movies. Do you know what I mean? I know there's a lot of jokes about, that surpassed, Titanic and almost surpassed Avatar. But I mean, Titanic, people will stand on jungle gyms with their friends and act out the, arms spread from the ship and flying jack scene. Yeah. But nobody really, there's nothing from Avatar really, except people making jokes about ponytail sex that is really, stuck over the last 10 years. But I feel like Endgame, it might. I think it'll pop up in other conversations.
Yeah. It's... being the climax of a 10, 11 year, 22 movie franchise,
yes,
sort of puts it apart from other big movies,
I feel like if you and I actually got paid each a nickel for every time we've incorporated the buzz phrase of 22 movie franchise, 11 years in the making, we would be so rich right now.
Not as rich as anyone actually attached to them.
Not as rich as Robert Downey Jr. Shout out to Papa RDJ for taking a percentage of the box office as opposed to being paid right out, because man, good call there.
So should we do the what have you been up to thing, or should we just dive into...
Give me a quick rundown on what Vincent's watched lately.
Okay, I haven't... I've been watching the same things, but I did recently get back into the video game Slime Rancher. Have you heard of Slime Rancher?
For the audience at home, I am making a hand passing over my head gesture to indicate that this reference is beyond me.
It came out a couple of years ago. It's a very it's a very peaceful game. It's you have a farm and you're on another planet, I guess, and the local inhabitants are these little like slime blobs that just like mill around, hop around, they're all smiling, they eat things, and you can like vacuum them up in your little like Luigi's Mansion style vacuum thing and like farm them, and you can if you give them food, they poop out a little like diamond thing, and you can sell the diamonds for money. I wrote an article about it for the Peak, the paper up at SFU, of how like just peaceful and just pastoral the game was. You know, it's just a very like refreshing. Like there's no like combat really. There's there's a part of the game where if you like feed one kind of slime the I guess poop of another slime, it'll become like a hybrid between the two.
Okay.
Right. And there's different kinds. There's the one that like it's like a firefly. There's one that it's like it has like spiky rocks on it and like rolls around. There's one that looks like a tabby cat. You know, there's one that's on fire. There's one that's there's a bunch of different kinds. So you can like mix and match. And the diamonds, they're called plorts. If you need to know the words.
What a fun made up word.
Yeah, they look like the you know in The Sims, the little like plumb bob, the little diamond thing above the head looks like that.
Yeah.
Right. But they're like different kinds, and they sell for different things when you like reverse vacuum them into the like selling machine to like make your money. But so if you feed one the plort of another one, it'll become like a bigger thing, and like a hybrid of the two. And you know, if it's the firefly thing and the cat thing, it'll have like the glowy like firefly wings and also like cat ears. You know, it's like a little cute. It's a very cute game. But if it eats a third one, it'll become a horrible like tower monster that will start eating things, and so you want to like stop that. That's the closest thing to combat in the game. If one of them accidentally, which I guess happens in the wild because there's like they're all just like hopping around,
eating each other's plorts, as it were.
Yeah. And there's like a bit more like combat music that shows up when they're like, oh no, there's danger around.
It's funny when you say danger around and say combat music, it just makes me think like you're out in the wild and all of a sudden like the Skyrim combat, like and everything gets really intense and these little plort diamond cat things start fighting.
It's not that.
Just without the Skyrim music.
Yeah, but it's a very nice looking game. You know, the slimes are all like little cute little like blobs just hopping around. There's little like chickens walking around. You could also like vacuum up and feed to things. It's a nice peaceful game. I played it a bit before it when it was still in early access, and since then they've added like the amount of game they had when I put it down. They've added that much again on top of it. So there's like a lot of
double what you had.
Yeah, double what I had. That's a much easier way to say it. The awkward thing I said it.
Streamlined. So that's been taking like a lot of your spare time or something?
Yeah. Like when I get home from work, I could just see these little cute blob things hopping around. There's different. It's a video game, so there's different environments. There's the jungle area. There's the there's the ancient ruins area. There's the dry desert area. And there's different slimes that are local to each of those areas. It's a fun time waster.
Yeah.
I also finished an audiobook of a book I had read before called Off to Be the Wizard, where it's a guy who's he's a bit of a hacker, and he finds the source code to the universe in a text file. As he starts messing around with it, he adds a couple zeros to his bank account, and then the IRS comes to chase him down. So he decides to escape, and his plan is to travel back in time to the Middle Ages and pretend to be a wizard.
Okay.
But he's not the first person to do that, so the other wizards who are already there was hey, kid, look, we got a good thing going here. We're going to put you through some tests to make sure you're not going to mess things up. And it's hilarious. It's very funny. It's a very there's a part where he's talking to the wizard who is his mentor. He's from the 80s, the mentor, right? It turns out that his crystal ball is actually a Commodore 64 he hid under the table that he used to program the spells and codes and stuff. It's very I like mashup, so it's a mashup of fantasy plus sci-fi.
Very nerdy, yeah.
But there's a part when his mentor is all right, you've proven I'm gonna take off the safe mode off of you now, so you can cast spells. Right, and he does that, and he clicks some clacks on his keyboard, and he walks away and stands in a doorway for a bit. He's yep, Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Yep. And then, like, he just pauses for a second, and he turns around and is like, hey, you passed the test. You didn't try to kill me. I'm going to really take off the safety now. Then he, like, clicks on the keyboard again. He stands back in the doorway, and he pauses for a second. He's like, okay, you passed the second test. You didn't try to kill me after I gave you the idea. And he, like, clicks on the keyboard again, and the guy is like, did you take it off for real this time? And the guy's like, I don't know. But no, it's really good. I really recommend it. It's called Off to Be the Wizard. I think it's part of a series now. I think there's a couple books after it.
Okay.
Sounds
fun.
Also, one more book, audiobook, because I'm efficient with my time, called The Last Policeman. It's by Ben Winters, I think is his name, the author. It was the second one, but the first one's called The Last Policeman. And in the first one, he's a detective who's trying to solve a suicide that he believes is a murder. But everyone believes it's a suicide because everyone's committing suicide because there's an asteroid that's going to blow up the planet 9 months down the line. Okay. Right? And that's the thing. They have the asteroid as like a background thing and not the main thing. Because, in a normal book or in a normal movie or whatever, a more Hollywood movie, that would be the primary plot of the movie. It's like, oh, we're space scientists. We're going to save the planet from this asteroid, blah, blah, blah.
Armageddon,
right? But when the book starts, all that discussion is already done. And they've decided, like, nope, there's nothing we can do. If we try to blow it up, it's just going to be a bunch of tiny pieces that are going to hit the Earth and kill us all that way. I think they even mentioned that, like, a couple months before the book starts, there was, like, a war between the U.S. and some other country because one of them was going to, like, try to nuke the asteroid, but that would just split into a bunch. So it's like, no, don't do that. You're going to make it worse. Yeah. Right. But yeah, so the main character is this detective who he was like a patrol cop for like a month. And then the asteroid news hit. So a bunch of people started like leaving their jobs to do other things. And so there's an opening for a detective and he always wanted to be a detective. So he's going to be a detective now. And the world is just really interesting of how like there's people who like, there's some people who just go on with their regular lives. There's some people who like go bucket list, as they describe, by like going scuba diving or traveling the world, or just bucket list things before the end of the world. And then there's some people who just start committing crimes because like they wanted to rob a bank or whatever. So they rob the bank, they get caught, and then they're just in jail for the last 9 months of their lives. Which is because they didn't really think it through. And there's like a couple chapters where he's like trying to text someone, but like the cell coverage is terrible because like no one's working anymore, really. So he has to like drive around trying to get a signal to text whoever he's trying to text. And in the second one, so the first one takes place like 9 months before the asteroid hits, and the second one takes place like 3 months before the asteroid hits. I think the third one of the 3 books takes place like a week or two before it hits. But in the second one, towards the end, at the climax, when he's trying to get across town to like to like catch the bad guy, that's just when like the water cuts off, right? So that's when like people like tip off into like being a lot more like Mad Maxy. Yeah, okay, good. Because like there's a part where he's like running down a block to try and get to the place, and he sees someone like break around the corner on a skateboard holding like a water cooler or water jug under his arm, and then like a lady books it around the corner and like with a shotgun like shoots him in the back and like picks up the water thing and like goes back into her thing, it's just a lot more like dystopian, active dystopia, but or active apocalypse, because like in the first book it's sort of like pre-apocalypse, right, and how it's starting to ease into like active Mad Max kind of end of days thing. So that's what I've been. So I guess that's the spectrum of things. There's the really light and adorable Slime Rancher. There's the funny and mashup tech meets magic of Off to Be the Wizard, and then there's the noir gritty detective novel of The Last Policeman. With Last Policeman, the whole like point of it is like what matters when nothing matters at all. Right. Like why bother solving a crime if everyone's gonna blow up in 9 months, right? So, but him, like he is the main character's like desire for justice, or like needing justice to be done, right, is what drives me. I'm looking forward to getting around to reading the third book. I think they're all out already, but yeah. That sounds like a good read, actually. I think, audiobooks. I was thinking about audiobooks after we were talking last time about a couple of them. Definitely, you're saying very time efficient, and also kind of adds to the
the production, the theatricality of it. I don't think I've done any other like alternate types of media. I think for me it's just been like TV and movies for the last little bit. Speaking of people who are really good narrators, both the stars of Good Omens, I finally finished that. Very much enjoyed it. It was quite a gas. That was good fun. I started watching the second season of Legion, the X-Men universe set series, which is also very trippy and very surreal.
I couldn't get through the first season.
I quite enjoyed it.
I've been meaning to get back to it. But.
It's definitely worth a watch. It's like they do some things that are just so completely off color, and then it takes you a moment and you realize, that you're in like somebody's mind and they're having like a hallucination kind of thing. It's like if you're one of those people who thought Inception was kind of like too highbrow or like too, kind of trippy for you and intricate, might not be your cup of tea. But there's some really great performances, some really fun stuff, and touches on like the X-Men universe in like a really, really unique way, I think.
I remember someone talking about Legion about how it's one of the like whoever owned the non-MCU Marvel properties just to throw things at the wall to see what's stuck, like that same with Logan, which is a bit more like outside the box of a superhero movie, but like with Legion it's this like weird like split personality, hallucination, mind trick kind of thing, and how like Disney's not going to be like, okay, give us Legion or we walk. No, it's like you can keep your weird thing.
You can keep your weird thing with your like good cast full of television actors, and we'll keep making movies with Hugh Jackman taking his shirt off. But no, exactly that. So it touches on like an interesting corner of the Marvel universe. It is really weird. Even some of the comics, like the comics, are obviously a lot more colorful and kind of strange than the TV show, but. Legion's still really good fun. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here because it just started its last season, so I'm a little bit behind, hoping to catch up. And also, speaking of which, I will not get into. I know you and I were talking about having seen Dark Phoenix. But like there's a whole conversation right there. I actually did quite enjoy it, and I know I'm in vast minority. But I actually got a lot out of it. I thought there were some really solid performances, and I'm sure the story could have been elongated, but powers that be in movie studios have kind of set it up that it was going to be the last X-Men movie without them really planning for it to be. So
I really enjoyed the fight at the end. That was
the train sequence.
Yeah.
I did too. You know what's funny is the one thing I will say is one of the complaints about that is people were talking about how the original third act that was axed involved like the X-Men and other mutants all coming together to fight those aliens in front of the UN building as like a sign of unity and everyone coming together. And some people that were writing it, I think they were just kind of, looking for clicks and looking for people to read their article. And so they presented it in a way that was like, could have been like the original sounds much better, quote unquote, see my air quotes here, ending. I'm like, how's that really different from any of the other X-Men movies though, really? Them going to the White House, them going to some, like the Paris Peace Accords, them going to, some other Washington monument, them at the Statue of Liberty. Like, how is it really any different but this time they're at the UN building, like, whoop-de-doo. I thought it was interesting, like you were saying, that they kind of went for, like a darker atmosphere and that they made it kind of more compact. And the kind of like the fast-paced moving forward momentum of the train sequence, I actually quite enjoyed it. I agree with you. And I think some people, that was one of the reshoots apparent things that a lot of people didn't like. I did quite enjoy it. If for nothing,
the train was a reshoot?
I feel like it was, yeah. Because that's what I'm saying. That was like the big fight at the end overall, right? When there was supposed to be this other one that I was talking about. But I mean, any fight sequence that contains Michael Fassbender clenching his fist and bottle can crushing an entire train car and throwing it away is like 10 out of 10 and 4 gold stars.
That scene, that part of that fight scene was pretty good. I did enjoy him just like when he was like killing the other aliens one at a time as part of this big big fight scene of everyone fighting like an Endgame, of these individual fights going on at the same time, of him just like flicking tiny pieces of metal.
Me too.
Like he didn't he just fought killed other than the can crushing the group at the very end of that. He did not kill more than 1% of the time.
Yeah,
because he would just take a chair seat sized. That's a weird scale, but like a chair seat sized piece of metal, just flick it at someone's chest, and then do the same thing with another person, and No, just get like a bigger piece. Get a bigger piece. Get more than one dude at a time.
Michael Fassbender's too dapper and, classy to do more than little wrist flicks at the time as he sends pieces of metal barreling through the air. I did also enjoy that part where he took like an entire rack of guns and just like unloaded them and just like emptied the clips into one alien. That was pretty cool.
If we're going to talk about the scene like after the train scene, is that a spoiler or like that they like... I'll just talk about it and we can cut it off if we don't want spoilers about this movie that you enjoyed, I thought was okay, and a lot of people don't apparently seem to care.
So you have to say your disclaimer first.
This is me meandering about...
No, you have to say your disclaimer, though.
What do you mean my disclaimer?
You have to say spoilers ahead of Dark... You have to say...
Oh, yeah. There's going to be spoilers for Dark Phoenix.
That's your job.
Me hemming and hawing about
for a second. Okay.
me hemming and hawing about talking about the ending of Dark Phoenix is me saying there's going to be spoilers.
No, but you have to directly say it. That's your job, not mine.
Anyway,
come on.
in the part when Jean is like hugging the evil alien, right, or whatever.
Yes.
And there's this like swirling sand energy, whatever, yes. and Cyclops is about to be disintegrated, which I guess was a nod towards the previous time they tried to do Dark Phoenix.
Yes.
And the bad guy's like, if you kill me, they're all gonna die. And in my head, I was like, if she does not fucking fly up into the sky, I will be upset because that is the one power that they have shown of hers in every scene she's in. Yes. Of her leaving the scene by flying straight up into the sky like a rocket. And I'm like, if she does not lift off the ground, I am walking out of the theater. So when they finally did, when like Sansa was like finally like, oh, you think you got me? And then like they fly out. I'm like, okay, yes, I am.
We're fine. Yeah. It's funny. My similar moment was the part where Magneto goes to try and kill Jean because he's pissed. And don't we all love sexy, smoldering Michael Fassbender whenever he's enraged piously about something? But when Jean starts crushing his helmet, I was like, if I have to fucking watch Michael Fassbender's Magneto die with my own two eyes in this like X-Men send off, I will get out and walk out of this theater regardless of how much I'm enjoying myself right now. So I also had a very near dramatic exit sequence.
I don't know what he was trying to, because like he can, like they both have similar powers, except his is very, very specific.
More niche, yeah.
You know, like if I have a gun and I'm fighting someone who has all the guns, I'm not gonna try you know a head on. You know what I mean? Like
probably, yeah. I did. So yeah, overall enjoyed it. Even if a lot of people didn't. The other thing, I saw Toy Story yesterday, which I actually did quite enjoy as well. I was one of the people who was skeptical of another one, but I thought they actually did a really good job with it. And where the characters kind of leave off was very fitting and apropos, I thought.
Do we want to talk about Toy Story for a bit?
Oh, I don't know. That's a big conversation. I feel like we should do one on Toy Story as a franchise. I feel like that's
when we
foreshadowing.
If we ever finish talking about Endgame, we'll talk about Toy Story.
And finally, the last thing I will say is I did also, as I was mentioning to you, see The Dead Don't Die this weekend as well. Jim Jarmusch's new film with a really good all-star cast, and I'll see anything.
It's got Bill Murray. It's got Kylo Ren. It's got.
It's got Tilda Swinton.
The ancient one?
The ancient one, which I will watch anything that Tilda Swinton is in. What's also hilarious, that I didn't realize until after I watched the movie, is that in a very classic, like tongue-in-cheek, quirky Tilda Swinton kind of way, her character's name is Zelda Winston. And I didn't realize until after I watched the movie that they made like the closest sounding name to her real name as possible, which I thought was quite a kick. But yeah, good cast. This was like a lot of people are kind of slagging on it. I'm seeing a lot of either like 1.5 star reviews or like 4 out of 5 star reviews, kind of at both ends, more on the negative side. But as I was kind of saying, they're getting very polarizing. But there gets to a point partway through the movie where Adam Driver is kind of like talking about zombies in almost identical way to 2 previous times. Like he's pretty much just reciting the same lines, where it kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is a B movie. Like this is a B movie made with an all-star A-list cast. And I think that's what Jim Jarmusch was going for, because he's always made some, kind of unique films. So yeah, I don't know. I quite enjoyed it. It wasn't, like my favorite movie of the year. It was super weird, but I had a lot of moments where I laughed out loud and went, what am I watching right now? So good fun overall. And, that's about me caught up, I'd say. Yeah. So with that in mind, did you find anywhere that was playing like the re-release of Endgame?
I have not.
No. I heard
for the extra 6 minutes.
The extra 6 minutes in total, yeah. I kind of wanted to do that as a tongue-in-cheek way of putting it above Avatar. I think that'd be hilarious, and I think everyone was pretty much on the same page as to what they were doing when they were re-releasing Endgame, is try and make it the number one movie of all time, which honestly I'm okay with. I was never really attached to Avatar anyways. So, so yeah, I did not see it myself, but I mean, I'm going to get it on Blu-ray when it comes out anyway, so I'm sure I'll get all the bits and bobs and bonus features.
Is the 6 minutes including the stinger they're apparently adding to the end, or is that like an extra? Is it 6 minutes plus the stinger, or is it?
I don't know.
Because it's like, from what I hear, it's an unfinished scene.
Yes,
and
with focusing on the Hulk.
Okay,
apparently,
is he going to explain how he, like, him arriving at the ancient one? Because there's sort of like they just lied over how, like, when he's like when Captain America's like, okay, you gotta pretend to be like the old crazy Hulk, and he's like, oh, okay, so he like half-heartedly smashes the taxi, tosses the cab, and then, like, you know, pretends to roar, and just like cuts to him like jumping on top of the building that Tilda Swinton's standing on.
Yeah.
He's like, wait, what happened here?
What did he do along the way? I mean, I don't think most people were probably busy running and screaming away from, you know, giant 12-foot tall green giant ogre, so no one probably really cares.
See, that was the thing that one of the other podcasts I listened to when they were talking about Endgame, they did it in one episode. That they were talking about how they wanted to see a lot more, like a lot of the things they did in that particular time travel chunk, you know, the Battle of New York chunk, were, in their opinion, very cheap, or like relatively cheap in terms of like cost. Not cheap as in like a cheap shot, but like cheap as in like not an expensive thing to do. Like, they had the clip of the circle shot of the triumphant, you know, heroes in a circle shot that we've seen a million times, and we could see a million times more. And then it pans over to like them a couple blocks down of like, hey, let's do our thing. But how they wanted to see, like, you know, there being two Hulks in this field. They wanted to see some kind of interaction between those two, instead of him just like cordoned off to the Ancient One's rooftop, or whatever, or like some more like expensive-y stuff. Like while the scene of the elevator scene with Cap and the Hydra agents we got in Endgame was hilarious and did very well, and every time I saw it, it would have also been cool to see like another fight there,
similar to the Winter, because they set it up to recreate that scene from Winter Soldier.
Yeah, and like there's something to be said about, like, you know, the joke of like, oh, you're expecting a fight, but it's not a fight, kind of thing. But you know, it'd be hilarious if that was It'd be hilarious if that was like their, you know, like Indiana Jones shooting the guard, kind of shooting the swordsman.
Which wasn't supposed to be in the script.
If there was originally supposed to be like a big fight, and he's like, then Chris Evans is like, hey, I have an idea.
What if I just say Hail Hydra and cut it all up at the knees? I did find interesting though, apparently the whole, like, the sequence that we saw in the film with the Hulk talking to the Ancient One, which is, like, said, like, Tilda Swinton's cameo is one of my favorites in Endgame. It was a reshoot, apparently. It took place like a year after the fact.
What was the Hulk doing when...
I don't know exactly. I think it was they kind of said some of the exposition and the dialogue specific to the scene, which we talked about last time when they were explaining whole time travel, when she's kind of...
I'm gonna have to pause for a second. So you're telling me that the scene where the guy who spearheads the snap, the guy who ends up snapping... The guy who ends up re-snapping the first time, talking to the person who explains time travel to them, that was something they added afterwards?
I think it was the specifics of the line and how they did it, maybe, like the visuals there, which, apparently took place a year after the fact. And that's what Tilda Swinton had commented on, that, you know, she's done a lot of different types of movies before, but this is like her first time being part of like a big, you know, multi-movie franchise sort of thing. So she said, you know, it's kind of strange, a year later, you're going back to this exact scene that you filmed to kind of seamlessly line up with what you'd already shot beforehand. So, I guess when, you know, you break it down like that, that was, as we had previously talked about, you know, one of the big scenes explaining the kind of...
this like narratively pivotal scene.
Yeah.
But like they were saying, like how they wish they were, like, you know, seeing the Hulk meet the Hulk.
Yeah.
You know, or like how they could have, like in the cool one take they had. I say one take, it was mostly CG, of like them like panning across each of the heroes fighting the aliens, and then going to the next hero, and then it ends with like Thor and the Hulk taking down one of the big like space whales, and then the Hulk punching Thor off camera, from off camera, punching him, so he's off camera now. How like they could have had that be Smart Hulk or something, you know, because you don't see the Hulk, you know, like but it could be the other Hulk kind of thing, you know, and to tie it in to the previous the first Avengers movie in a more like, oh, this is why this happened, right? You know, because the stuff that we saw happened the stuff that we saw happen in Endgame is either stuff we didn't see happen in the first one, or like stuff beside the stuff we saw happen.
Right. Which I think ties into, again, the whole, you know, you've created an alternate universe by going back to this point in time. So I guess that's maybe why they kind of felt they didn't have to play with revisiting too many of the old
I
scenes.
guess.
Although I did like some of the bits that they did, like for example when the Avengers are apprehending Loki and you see what happened after that whole scene, you know, where it's them posing in front of him sort of thing. So I thought it was interesting how you kind of see what happens after some of the original scenes, but then they also, you know, obviously kind of, they did their own thing. It was the same with the one that really I thought was quite funny was the one where you see Star-Lord, like Chris Pratt, when he's on right from the beginning of the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and you can see some of the, you know, like alternate takes and angles and stuff like that they probably shot with him, and then, you know, have him getting punched out. I thought it was funny how they did that, kind of revisited some of these iconic moments.
That was a weird pair-up, though.
Which?
Of War Machine and Nebula.
Yeah, I feel like that was one thing that I wondered if there was ever originally supposed to be more of in their script draft, because they very much tied into this whole, like, you know, her saying, I wasn't always this way, and him like, yeah, me neither, but you work with what you got. This whole, like, Rhodey's not technically a cyborg, but he's got robo legs now, so.
Yeah, like, if they were, like, do they ever explain who comes up with the pairings?
I don't think so. I think it's just part of the implied while they're all spending, like, you know, a couple of weeks working on this plan together.
Right, because, like, if it was, like, one person in charge, like, oh, man, they're both weird robots, maybe they're going to bond over them being not fully organic anymore. I'm gonna put those two together. Yeah. And, like, who was in charge of putting Hawkeye? Like, what if they didn't have Hawkeye and Black Widow as that pair, you know? Yeah. Like, what would they do then? You know? I suppose. And does it have to be a you know, you have to sacrifice something you love or whatever. Which they sort of go. Sometimes it's you have to sacrifice what you love, and other times it's a soul for a soul. Right. But what if the thing you love? What if you're like really into this teddy bear? You know, what if you're a child who's like has like a beloved childhood toy? You know,
just throw your teddy bear down into the pit of all-encompassing darkness and doom to get the soul.
Yeah, not even and like I wonder, like the mechanics. Like I don't know what the soul stone does other than like guilt you with the ghost of a child after you do your thing. But like, at what point, like, because like. So we've seen it twice, you know, in Infinity War and then in Endgame of someone
making
leaving the cliff, let's say.
What an odd euphemism.
Leaving the cliff downward.
Leaving the cliff.
And then the sky going all like wormholey, and then the person who's still on the cliff waking up in a pool 50 miles away. Right. But at what point, like, what are the mechanics of that? You know, like, I mean, like, at what part of them hitting the ground underneath the cliff activates the soul stone? You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, I would think that does like what happens to the corpse? Like, does Red Skull just go from like mop up the pool of blood?
Imagine he's just like hovering there with all those little wispy shadow things all around, like holding a mop. A soul for a soul. They don't pay me enough to do this. Yeah, I think so. The implication that I took, anyways, and this is just like divesting from the fact that obviously they changed some stuff for the comic books, but I think the Soul Stone, as maybe the name implies, is in itself supposed to be kind of sentient. Oh yeah, like, I think totally. You know what I mean? Like it has an awareness of what you've done. Sure. You can. Sure, it's alive. It has a PhD. I don't care. But like, what does it do? What does it do? You know, like the space stone, like the Tesseract, you portal places. The purple power stone makes you strong.
You can punch shit. You know, it has like a shockwave when you put it into a hammer or whatever.
Yes.
I know the time stone. I wonder what that does. It time travel. Yes. Time stone does time travel.
The mind stone does mind stuff.
The mind stone makes you have a robot that's alive.
Yes.
Which I guess, but then there's overlap with that with the soul stone. So wait, so are they implying that Vision does not have a soul?
I mean, I think that's a little bit more of a conversation than we can answer. And do androids dream of electric sheep?
and how they sort of they didn't even have a reference to Vision. They have Scarlet Witch talking about it at the end after the funeral or whatever. I don't know. It wasn't until afterwards when they were talking about Vision. I'm like, oh yeah, they didn't have Vision in there. They had the guy who inspired Tony Stark to build the voice that would eventually become the voice of Vision, but they didn't have Vision there at all. You know, not even like a picture or something.
I mean, I think that's the thing though, is when else they had the way of getting around Gamora dying in Infinity War by bringing back a time-displaced version of her in Endgame. So I think it's in this one, it's when all said and done, basically Vision, Black Widow, and Iron Man are kind of the only three who are perma-dead.
Well, and Loki is. Oh yeah,
they're doing the different timeline thing with him, which I am kind of curious about. I'm looking forward to all those alternate series, actually. But I think what it came down to, too, is that
Heimdall is also nuts.
Heimdall, don't get me started on killing off any movie franchise that kills off Idris Elba. I mean, I got questions about because we talked last time too about how there was that alternate scene originally where they were going to include Idris Elba in, which I would have been on board for. But I feel like from here it kind of leaves with what is the future of the MCU, and I feel like for them to get it to where they want it to be, everyone has to leave off where they are at the end of Endgame. Do you know what I mean? I think by killing Iron Man and Scarlett Johansson rather, and then even Vision, because there's supposed to be that Vision and Scarlet Witch TV show happening. I feel like all these people had to be dead. They had to be where they were at. So I feel with that, there are so many mysteries that they've deliberately left as to where the MCU is going from here, which I obviously was very deliberate.
And I feel like some of those would be addressed, or at least thematically addressed, with Far From Home, which is the epilogue.
Yeah, exactly, as it's been described. Yeah, which is coming out in a couple weeks, and they've said that they're waiting until after that comes out to kind of announce any big stuff with the Marvel movies going forward. Right. So I feel like with that, you know what I mean? There's so many interesting theories that people have on, them bringing in maybe more Spider-Man characters into the MCU and how that could affect it. There's obviously a lot of talk about the Eternals, which is the next big movie on the horizon, which would, be set thousands of years before the present day with aliens coming to Earth and how they've kind of shaped how superheroes developed and everything. And one of the things that also goes along with that is the characters of the Eternals are tied into, Thanos and his people. So there's a lot of people wondering, are we going to get more of a backstory, on this big purple warlord guy?
Yeah, although with stuff happening on Earth in the past sort of takes away retroactively Captain America being the first Avenger. He's a weird one. He's super strong and he can lift shit or whatever. But then when they fill in the lore, the backstory of the human race as having been visited by the Kree, having Star-Lord's dad show up and drop a thing behind a DQ, all these weird
timely references,
or even in they do some of that in some of the lore they explain during Age of the Shield, with the Hydra stuff, and even in Agent Carter, they have one of the bad guys is a lady who absorbs a bunch of black goo and then
and then just dark magic-y stuff. I remember.
Yeah, and then basically black holes a factory.
Yeah.
So there's a crater there, and I'm why is everyone surprised about Iron Man? He's a rich person with a suit.
Which, I think what was kind of interesting, too, is something... I rewatched the first Iron Man recently and was kind of thinking of it as it pertains to Endgame, the progression from, the first Marvel movie to the current. And I wonder in the world that the MCU takes place in how exactly advanced their technology is, right? How much of an outlier is Tony Stark making a big robo-suit, right? How far-fetched is that to the people in the MCU? Because at this point, they're, they may not be aware of some of the, the original Ant-Man and some of the more covert S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff that S.H.I.E.L.D. obviously as a government agency deliberately kept under wraps, but everybody knew Captain America was, do you know what I mean? There was some, at least, allusion to a knowledge of superheroes existing.
Speaking of everyone knowing Captain America for a second, though, in Captain Marvel, a lot of people were disappointed that Coulson's character was sort of not really...
Sidelines, yeah.
Yeah, sort of sidelined. He didn't really have a personality that much.
Yeah.
Right? And how the podcast I mentioned before, their idea of like how to give him some personality was if he just kept mentioning, or at the end when he's talking to Nick Fury, like, oh, we're not going to find another person like Captain Marvel or whatever he says, right? How they would have liked it if he mentioned Steve Rogers, like, of like, oh, we haven't had someone like that since Steve Rogers or something, to have like, to tie in that he's a huge Captain America fan. Right. But also, if you think about it, if he's just been trying to name drop Steve Rogers every day at work since the 90s, that's sort of like, oh yeah, when he meets him, he's gonna fangirl out.
Yeah, the big build-up. It is, though. It's curious to where it goes from here, particularly because, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I want them to keep making these movies until, the end of time. I want to keep seeing how they're going to make it interesting, how comic booky and far-fetched and crazy they're going to get. But at the same time, it's very easy to, you could, like, as with, there are certain TV shows or movie series where you get to a certain point and you're like, if I wanted to, I could just put a bookmark here, I could put a pin in it and stop, and this is where it ends. If you wanted to, Endgame could just be the culmination of everything. Endgame could be the end, right? Yeah. You could, in your head, envision that the Falcon goes on to be Captain America, and that someone else maybe takes up the Iron Man mantle, and that Spider-Man's going to keep being Spider-Man. You could choose to put a pin in it and stop there if you wanted.
There's, I remember someone talking about Skyrim. Right. They just finished the like Assassin's Guild quest or whatever, so they were like the king assassin or whatever the fuck. And then they go to the next town, and the person wanted them to join the like Thieves Guild or whatever, and they're like, okay, to join the Thieves Guild, you got to kill these 10 rats under the pier. And the guy was like, no, I will not do that. I am the king assassin. I could murder you right now in the middle of the day on the street, and no one will see me. I am not going to do that. And as a player, he just like stopped playing. He stopped playing there because that was narratively where his character would stop, like he's reached the pinnacle of being an assassin or whatever it was I said. So right. Like, okay, that's in my head, that's where he's gonna stop. He's gonna have adventures as the king assassin or whatever, and he's not gonna kill like some fucking rats to start up at the bottom rung of this other ladder.
Right.
So there's sometimes there's poetry in choosing a place to stop.
Right, and in an ending that isn't fully tied up. Honestly, like a recent example for me, I'm sure, I'm ready to just light the world on fire here if anyone cares about my opinion. I felt that way about the finale of Game of Thrones. And that was something that I actually personally enjoyed. A lot of people thought it was too open-ended. There were some things I'll concede I think were just loose plot points that tie into like an overall problem with the final season and things that weren't wrapped up. But there were some character storylines that to me, I was fine with being open-ended. Much the same with, we talked last time about a series of unfortunate events. Not so much the show, more the books on which they're based. Very much kind of leave a little bit of ambiguity as the face of the main character.
Yeah. The whole thing was like, there's no ending to a story.
And see, that's what's absolutely fascinating, though, is I feel like you could view Endgame through that lens, but a lot of people, I feel like to make it digestible, a large audience doesn't like that. I've had many conversations with people that have just reinforced how different we all view media and view stories overall, and that there's a lot of people I've talked to about some of the things I've just alluded to and other stories who don't like that. They don't like the open end. They want definitively to know that their character gets a happy ending, or that the main character dies, or that the villain goes to jail. They want that concrete, finite knowledge. And to me, I think sometimes exactly like what you just said, exactly, there's poetry and beauty in imagining, that your assassin king in Skyrim went on to do whatever.
Yeah, there was another game I was playing where it was, the title of it isn't important, but there's a part of it where it's just this, like, you have to, like, collect these things, these, like, and you have to do these, like, mini games, these puzzles or something, and I was just like, I wasn't really liking it, so I was like, oh man, it's a weird choice for this game, just to end in the middle of this puzzle as I shut down the game, that's a weird, bold choice for this game, just to finish in the middle of this quest.
Something tells me that you were one of those kids in elementary school who specifically looked out the special editions of Goosebumps that were the pick your own adventure ones.
I never really read Goosebumps.
Okay.
I was more of an Animorphs kid.
Okay. Well, Animorphs. Let's make a retro take me back book throwback about Animorphs. Put a pin in that. That's brainstorm for another time. Are you excited? Okay, you strike me, yeah, okay. If you don't like Goosebumps as a specific example, those books that you would read as a kid that you'd find in the library and you can't tell how old they are because it looked like the copyright is that it came out a couple of years ago, but all the pages are yellowed and the cover's paperback and kind of torn up, and it's one of those, turn to page 67 if you want this to happen. Turn to page 95.
Choose Your Own Adventure?
That's what I was saying, yeah. So, Those are always fun. Those are a good alternate reality, endgame timeline, multiple timeline, what if. But you know what I mean? You also have to, something like that, reconcile the fact that the ending, you know, might not be all ribbons and bows, even if you get a half-decent one. And I feel like something that also does that is certain episodes of Black Mirror, for example. You and I personally discussed before, like, the brilliance of that show, and I think that's something that gets into people's skin about it. Like, the thing that makes it impactful is not just the commentary about society and technology, but it's also those endings of, you know, you can imagine what you want the character to do after, but you're never going to know. And there's always going to be that kind of, you know, splinter in your finger that you can never get the feeling to go away, that it wasn't completely concrete. And sometimes that's fine, right? And I think that's what I'm saying is, like, there was enough of a wrap up with Endgame and enough of, I think, like a concrete ending that if you wanted to, you could just stop right there and you don't need to go along. And if you want, like you say, to view Spider-Man coming out as an epilogue, which, you know, is kind of how Marvel's marketing it, but you could just view it as the end of the story. Do you know what I mean? By all intents and purposes, even down to the fact. So now moving into, as we're kind of, you know, coming to the wrap up here of talking about this great impactful film, even the fact that they made the choice at the end to, you know, kill Thanos. Or ostensibly, you know, some people have their fan theories as to what happened when Iron Man, you know, gives his life and snaps Thanos and his entire army out of existence. Some people think, oh, they were actually transported somewhere, or they were sent back in time, or this happened, that happened. I fundamentally do think that even though, you know, Marvel killing off villains has been a problem in the past, I think that that's what they did. Is I think that they did kill the threat, and I think it was probably for the best, because realistically, if this gigantic, you know, purple McDonald's mascot on roids ever got a hold of, you know, any of these, you know, MacGuffin artifacts again, he'd end the world. That's just kind of what it is. That's, you know, with a character, you know, one of my things was, I wish Josh Brolin had gotten a chance of more screen time in Endgame, but ultimately he did come back full force in the last act, and he was never going to stop. And I think he made pretty clear what his motivations were.
Yeah. Thanos didn't seem to be the kind who were like, oh, you got me.
Yeah.
You know,
can't put him in prison, you know,
kind of thing. Although that does have because there's the Batman argument. Right. Oh, like the reason Batman doesn't kill anybody was, one, because, you know, his childhood had a very impactful murder attached to it. But also, sometimes they explain where it's because he wants them to have the chance of redemption, of like rehabilitation, and by killing them, that sort of takes away that agency of them. The Joker's sort of pushing it, but even with the Joker, you know, he's like, he sees, like, he can imagine that the Joker one day might turn around, you know, and be a good guy. And that's why he never murders the Joker, or anybody. Except for, I guess, Ben Affleck's one where he's just blowing up people in cars, and he's like, no, I'm not murdering them. The car exploding is murdering them, or whatever.
Guns don't kill people.
whatever the explanation of that is.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But I mean, exactly that this is, you know, in this case, there's some great examples of fiction where they do that, where they do the whole storyline where they rehabilitate a character. There's been lots of great sci-fi TV shows that done it. The Walking Dead comic in particular, and I think the TV show, I haven't really kept up on it, have done it with Negan, you know, who was one of the arch villains for a while there, making him somewhat more of a sympathetic character later, which is great because it's not something you'd ever see happening. Yeah. You know, the character of Jaime Lannister on Game of Thrones, we won't talk about the last season, how they left him kind of out to dry, but overall, you know, redeeming these characters.
Yeah, and like, the Marvel heroes have never really been the one to shy away from a body count.
Right.
So it'd sort of be like, it would stick out morally if they were like, well, nope, you're off the jail, you know, for the murder for the reversed murder of half the universe.
Yeah, it's kind of a big one. But you know what? Even if it was, regardless of the whole, you know, whether they killed him as they did in combat or they killed him in cold blood, whatever. I don't really exactly like you. So when you lay out what this character has done, you can't really justify keeping him alive, and fundamentally, like it's not like he's someone that the audience would be okay with seeing. Yeah, do you know what I mean? There's not going to be some great consternation today, as much as we all love, you know, Josh Brolin with mocap dots on his face. Fundamentally, like it was time to do that, and I think in that way, it also speaks to kind of the greater payoff. Which, as I've said multiple times, I do think that the movies are brilliant for what they did with Iron Man, RDJ's Iron Man, and how they brought him full circle, and the character development that he showed up in, even the movies that he wasn't starring in the MCU. They did a lot of good development. But I also feel like, so cycling back to, you know, wrapping up, by making the decision to get rid of Thanos. Obviously, they can always do an alternate future or an alternate timeline or him from the past or him in the prequel, whatever. They can do that if they want. It's the universe is big enough they could do that. But by finally wrapping up this person who has basically orchestrated all of the, not all of the villains, but a lot of the big kind of story plot moments thus far, going back as far as the Avengers, when he was revealed to be the puppet master behind everything. By taking all this time to build up to him and then summarily, getting rid of him, it kind of also adds to that. It's another character storyline ending. And I think it's also particularly interesting to look at it that way when you take into account something the director said about Infinity War, which has been said about other movies, but I really feel they did a good job with, of saying that Infinity War was Thanos' story. Yeah. Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, all of them are there to color it and to basically be the antagonists, if you want to look at it that way, of what is fundamentally Thanos' story. He is the main character. And I think that they actually didn't just hype it and they didn't just market it that way, they actually lived up to it. So now when you look at Endgame, if you view it through the guise of the enemy or Thanos' antagonist once again becoming the protagonist as the audience is spending more time with them, it also feels like more kind of like a comforting wrap up, in that you've seen it from both sides. Like, even if you don't agree with Thanos, which I'm really hoping you don't, and I think they're hoping you don't, you're probably not going to sympathize with him, but the movie gives you ample opportunities to, and it gives you so many chances to see it from his perspective, even though he's literally talking about, murdering billions of organisms.
No, in his, appearance in Endgame after he's been murdered, you sort of underscores how crazy he is when he's, faced with the, side effects or, the downsides of his plan. He just, instead of being like, oh yeah, you're right, let me work on this, he's like, nope, doubling down on this, just kill
everyone.
I'll kill both halves. How about that?
Yeah. How do you like that? There's also some fire memes that are being made out of people using the line of when he says, I will shred this universe down to its last atom. There's some really great memes I've seen out of that. Like, someone was, showing a video, or there was an article that was like, a dog and her 7 puppies were left in a sealed garbage can, and then beneath it, someone photoshops in the Josh Brolin, the Thanos line from Endgame, I will shred this universe down to its last atom. So fire memes aside, it gave a lot of moments to look at this character one final time. And like you're saying, realizing, he doubled down and he was willing to kind of exterminate the universe in pursuit of his goals, which, at some point in the storyline, in his mind, he was the hero, right? And I think that's what it came down to, and that's what this first 22 movie arc was building towards. And I think they really sold that kind of with a 1-2 punch at the very end there. So, which, kind of brings you to the end of the movie. I feel like there's a lot to be said about, Iron Man's role in it. A lot of people have said already. I think they made the decision, really the only decision that they could, by writing off Robert Downey Jr. and giving him a proper send-off. And it's funny because sometimes people talk about fan service moments. And I think that, the funeral sequence, for example, some people, whenever all the characters get gathered together in something, some people just accuse it of, it's fan service-y, it's being fan service. But I think they made a really nice moment that was actually showing, as the camera pans around to all these people that have basically been touched by the life of Tony Stark, you're also really getting an insight into how the MCU has been predicated around, this guy, the godfather of the Marvel movies, the one who started it all, right? And it feels like a fitting wrap-up at the very end.
Yeah, and when the camera, lingers on Hank Pym and, the Ant-Man family for a bit, that was one of the more touching pans, because I remember during the Ant-Man movies how he's like, the Avengers? No, there's a Stark on there. I hate the Starks.
Yeah, exactly.
Him being there for the funeral. Although I do remember seeing some people joking about when it panned over to War Machine and Bucky and, I guess, Nebula was with them?
And Scarlet Witch.
Oh, Scarlet Witch, yeah. Putting, fake captions on it of War Machine turning to Bucky. He's like, dude, you killed his parents. You could at least put on a suit.
Yeah. It's true, yeah. He's kind of standing there all in black, sorry, I killed your mom, dude.
He's in black, but it's like a shirt, just he's like a motorcycle.
You know what? Bucky's been through enough. Bucky is no chill. He doesn't care about a funeral, He's there to apologize for killing the guy's parents, but, And I think the most beautiful thing, kind of bringing it home, too, as we kind of wind down on this, one of my favorite moments in the entire movie is just the very simple fact that in that scene, the funeral, as they're all saying goodbye to Tony Stark, and, you know, it's just before they cut to Captain America's end to kind of, you know, close the movie down. The last person that you see as the camera pans to the back is Sam Jackson walk in as Nick Fury, which just, it was to me so poignant because it evokes the first ever Marvel movie stinger, the post-credit scene of Iron Man, when, you know, he introduces himself as Nick Fury, and I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. He was like the second most important player, because after, you know, the introduction of, like I said, this Godfather character that all the Marvel movies were centered around in Tony Stark, they bring in, you know, Nick Fury, iconic character from the comics, Mr. Eye Patch, whatever. But it started with the two of them. They were the first two, you know what I mean, like Marvel characters interacting, kind of hinting at what was to come. And I thought it was just brilliant how they shot that with, you know, they take their time, like you said, lingering the camera on all these people who've been affected, and they just end with the man who brought him into the fold in the first place.
Yeah, plus that kid who no one recognized.
Oh yeah, the kid who was in Iron Man 3. Yeah. The internet was funny, all the articles people were writing, the clickbait articles, of like, who was that kid in Iron Man 3? Here's the Endgame Iron Man 3 cameo.
When I was one of the times when I was working, I was waiting for some people to get out of the theater so I could clean the theater. There was this one lady walking out ahead of her friends, and she was typing in something on her phone, and then she turns around and is like, when you type in kid at, to talk to her friends, like, when you type in kid at, it auto completes the kid at Stark funeral. Because apparently that was in one of the, like, Google top searches.
Because the internet needs their answers, right?
Yeah, like, I don't know what you could have done to make it more recognizable.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, kids have growth spurts or whatever, but, like, I guess him having a potato gun wouldn't be tonally appropriate.
No, probably not. Him at the funeral, just popping spuds into the legs, and they're like, all right, the random kid is here. And so, of course, our last thing to talk about is that divisive scene that ends the movie with, you know, Steve Rogers, Captain America Shield Man, deciding to pass on the mantle and grow old and live a happy life. And I think I might have talked about this back in the first episode when we broke down where all the characters were at, but I really disagree with people's criticisms, I think, you know, basically saying that it was selfish and it was unlike Cap. And, you know, I figured at this point, aside from his whole line of, you know, deciding to take Tony's advice and live life, this is a guy who gave up everything he possibly could, right? For his country, like, even not just being like for his country, for freedom, like for, like, to save people's lives, to save a lot of people's lives. Yeah. He's given up and sacrificed time and time again. So why should he have to continue to soldier on, like, pun intended, I guess, when he has the chance of, like, a happily ever after? And I think some people were almost being selfish because they thought Cap was selfish. I didn't understand that. I think everyone, you know, people who put themselves in the line of fire for other people, I think everyone eventually deserves their chance at, you know, a happy ending.
Yeah, and I think that hinges on like how you interpret time travel to work in excuse me, how you interpret time travel to work in the movie. If he went into the past and then lived out to the present instead of, I think, what a lot of people have settled on, that going to another timeline and then coming back into this one at the end when they call him back, then sure, he you know, there's a bunch of horrible things that he could have stopped but didn't. Right. But if he is living with Peggy in a alternate universe and not the main universe we've seen him in, then who knows what kind of things he's prevented? Who knows? Maybe he pulled the Avengers together in the 40s. You know, maybe there's like a 40s version of the Avengers with I don't know who's still around. There's probably still a bunch of aliens. I'm not too brushed up on my MCU lore of the 40s. Maybe the rest of the cast of Agent Carter. I'm sure they're still kicking around. They're not doing anything now.
They're doing stuff, yeah.
But yeah, no. Maybe he built some kind of golden age of peace and prosperity across the stars, with his knowledge of the future. And now he's like, all right, I really need to get back.
Yeah. As well as realizing the fact that, you know, things like 9/11 would have happened. Things like, you know, his best friend being brainwashed would have happened. Things like, you know, the murder of various political figures and, you know,
wars and everything, assassinations,
would have happened. But I mean, also at the same time, I think also as part of his realization of, despite knowing about it, that it's not maybe his place. You know, that these things were going to play out. That he's living in a different timeline. Sure, he's got a bit of latitude to change things, but it's not also his job to play, you know, God and to alter
he did spearhead the bringing back of 50% of the universe. That does require a bit of playing God, you know?
I mean, I think the fact that it was something that was unnatural and like on a cosmic scale, right? I'm not saying that real world travesties are natural or should be endorsed, but there's things that happened, you know what I mean? Like, this was an event that affected all the world at once that was fundamentally unnatural and was, like, caused, you know what I mean, by an outside source. And I feel like...
Sure. But I think a lot of the, like, chiefing about Cap potentially, or, you know, theoretically going off on retirement is if he's just clocking out completely, you know? If we do somehow find out that he did, you know, continue saving the world just, you know, while dating Peggy instead of watching Peggy slowly succumb to Alzheimer's, then I imagine that would be a lot easier to swallow for people. Of like, oh yeah, no, he's still doing his thing. He's just doing his thing in his correct time zone.
Right.
Or whatever.
And I feel like that is something that not only have they touched on and said maybe one day that's one last story they could tell with Chris Evans, but I think some of the backlash is also kind of cycled to exactly what I was talking about earlier about storylines ending with an open note and how some people can't like deal with that. Like some people don't want to. Some people want an extra, like, you know, I'd let Endgame be as long as they wanted it to be. I'd watch a 5-hour Avengers movie, don't you get me wrong, but some people want to know what happened to Cap and they need those answers and they want a montage or whatever, and sometimes you just gotta just respect even that last scene when, you know, Falcon asks him, you know, you gonna tell me about her and tell me what went on and tell me about this girl you married, and he just says, no, I don't think I will. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes you need to know enough that it happened, and we don't get all the answers, but like everyone's where they need to be, and it worked out in that way.
Yeah, and that song was a great song.
A long
time gone.
Yeah. It's when they had their slow dance finally, which is, you know, one of the most delayed gratification payoffs in any Marvel movie is Cap and Peggy finally getting their dance together.
Yeah,
like warms your heart. That's the last scene again, right there. As I said, if they chose to wrap everything up right there, you're comfortable in the knowledge knowing that after 70 years. He finally got his dance. Which, of course, also brings to the forefront all the jokes about Steve Rogers, the 70-year-old virgin. But also maybe a topic for another podcast. So, in conclusion, lots of stuff not talked about, I'm sure, but fundamentally addressing the three big acts, one of the largest movies of all time. I know for me, it's a straight Avengers Endgame, straight 10 out of 10. It was the culmination of a series that has like been with me as I've grown up, like since I was, you know, preteen, teenager. I've watched all these characters, grown with these characters, watched some actors become better at acting. The music, you know what I mean, has burned its way into my subconscious. Comic books or no comic books, really come to care about the movie depiction of these characters as their own entities. So, I don't know, and Avengers Endgame, straight 10 out of 10 for me.
I really enjoyed it as well. A really, really emotive movie. Would have liked to have seen them include Coulson somehow, but other than that, solid movie. But yeah, thank you for listening to us continually talk about Endgame. We'll be cutting off Endgame as the primary topic after this episode. But we'll probably keep talking about it. We can't not talk about it.
Oh, it'll come up.
Yeah, it'll, of course it'll come up.
We have to talk about the abject poverty and squalor in the other Asgardian realms, right? Once again.
Yeah. And more about what happens during the 5-year time gap. I want to see that. So, I want to see more of that. But, thank you for listening. Tell your friends. If you like what you heard, tell your friends. If you liked what you heard enough, leave a review. Leave a rating. 5 is what I would advise.
Same as what I'd give Avengers Endgame. We're cycling it all back. Was there anything we didn't touch on? Let us know. After taking 3 episodes to cover this monolith movie, was there anything that you fundamentally did, but respectfully, no nasty swears, please, that you disagreed with us on? Or was there anything big that we didn't cover?
Let us know your thoughts. If there's something you thought we were wrong about, I guess. And all our contact information will be in the description, because I don't remember what they are anymore. Woo! Thanks for listening, everybody.